11 o'clock, welcome in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you on this Friday morning. Unfortunately, the news of the day is not fun news to talk about, that being South Carolina falling in the first round of the NCAA tournament 87-73 to Oregon yesterday. We've been talking about it all morning long. Sometimes you run into a hot team. Sometimes you run into a hot player. Unfortunately, South Carolina ran into both yesterday.
I thought we were going to talk about Kentucky losing all day.
We can do that too. By the way, have you checked on your KSR boys at all?
Chris sent me a picture. My man is sitting there. Was this like a post-game live stream, I guess?
Yeah.
He's sitting there, and I guess he was kind of hosting. And he looked kind of like Yuva, honestly, like in that picture. But he's sitting there, head down.
I'm going to send it to Mike and get his
just holding up his mic to the other person, like not even paying attention to what they're saying.
Not engaged at all. Not happy.
Well, hey, this is their Super Bowl. And once again, getting bounced by a double-digit seed within the first two rounds.
Yeah, that was rough. Rough day for the SEC, but I don't think any Gamecock fans were crying about watching Kentucky lose.
I think
honestly.
That was a little bright spot at the end of a tough day.
Small, bright spot. But like you said, I mean, tough day for South Carolina. I think it played out like when we were talking on air and off air. Like I remember it being like, "Hey man, you think they're gonna win or not?" And it was kind of like, who knows? Like honestly, and you were just wondering how the game itself was going to play out. Like if South Carolina was able to force Dante to work a lot and maybe get him in foul trouble, like you kind of looked at the lack of depth as far as Oregon's true playmakers, and you kind of said if it played out a certain way, South Carolina could win the game, and if it played out the way it actually did in reality, it was going to be tough. And watching Couisnard for a few years here in Columbia, I kind of had a feeling he was either going to go like 2 for 7 with 5 points, or he was going to go off, and there was going to be very little in between. And obviously, we all saw which one of those it was. So, but I think as much as, as silly as this is to say, obviously Couisnard was a big part of the story, and credit to him. But I thought it was the big men for Oregon, not just Dante. Like they actually had defensively the size they had in the paint. I thought gave Carolina fits just in running their offense and getting the looks that they normally did. South Carolina was able to pick it up a little bit in the second half and score a little bit more. But when Oregon was getting what they got out of Couisnard, it made it really tough to chip away at that deficit.
I was going to say, I think we knew that they were probably going to win in the paint, just given the size that they had coming into the matchup, and their perimeter play had been hit or miss this season. Again, Couisnard, around a 30-point shooter for most of the season, and just ended up having the game of his life yesterday. Shelstad, a streaky 3-point shooter in and of itself. He had 11 points yesterday as well. So when you add an amazing perimeter game for them into what was already a good dominant post game, I mean, it's hard to beat.
Yeah, I think the concerns that you had going into the game of, hey, if these things happen, you're going to be in trouble, those happened, and it started really in that first half. Dante was the number one thing that everybody was talking about, or who everybody was talking about, that he was being talked about on the Oregon side as being probably their most important player. He was being talked about on the South Carolina side as a guy that you really had to watch. And I think he really, to your point, Wes, great point, he really affected the game defensively, even on kind of hidden plays, right? You saw, I thought, for instance, South Carolina was kind of tentative to go into the paint, tentative to take him on. And you understand that, right? I mean, this guy's a really, really good athlete. He's long. He can block shots. He's very active, can move his feet. And I think that caused some issues. Dana Altman, give him credit for Oregon, their coach. He's been around the block. This guy's coached in a lot of basketball for several different schools. He's been in a lot of tournament games, and I thought he did a really good job too. And when you kind of combine that with some of your shots not falling, where you did get some good shots, that makes it tough. Then Couisnard, I mean, a lot of the shots Couisnard made were contested. Were there some open ones? Yes, that he made. But a lot of them were just, he was a little bit better than you on that play, even against good defense.
I would say you were doing everything right up to that point. He just had the game of his life.
Yeah, and we like I said, we saw that in flashes here, man. He the game, I remember the game that his mom had been dealing with an illness, and she was in town for the game. And remember, he went off. Can't remember how many points he scored. He went he's always been that guy that could go off from time to time, and he obviously did it yesterday, and you credit him for that. And it just played. You're sitting there. How many times did they say, well, that's the second foul on B.J. Mack? Well, that's the second foul on Zachary Day. You were sitting there. It was kind of playing out exactly the way it didn't need to from a South Carolina standpoint. If you could have got 2 early ones on Dante, then, kind of forced them out of what they wanted to do, then it plays out a little bit differently. But I thought Oregon got pretty good play from sort of their supporting cast as well. And so I don't know how much of that necessarily showed up in the box score for each guy, but I thought they looked to me like we talked about whether momentum carries over. A lot of times it doesn't always carry over, even though we expect it to from a tournament run. This looked like a team where that confidence did sort of carry over. They knew exactly who they were as a team. And Chris was talking about their coaching job they did. Credit them for whatever that almost matchup zone, like morphing, zone to man to zone, back and forth, and then it morphed within an actual possession at times. Like that, Lamont Paris talked about it going into the half. I think he used the word stagnant for South Carolina's offense. It definitely gave South Carolina some trouble. And in a game like this where you are talking about 2 teams that are pretty evenly matched, even though Oregon did, they won the game fairly handily, I think, to give them credit. But if these 2 teams played 10 times, like one team's going to win 6 and one team's going to win 4.
Yeah.
And so credit to them. They had a good plan, and on this given day, they were definitely the best team.
I was going to say, the entire team, they're shooting 60%. That's not going to happen every single night. It just happened to happen last night. And talking about that zone defense that they were running, that's something that they've used at times during the regular season. They really hit it hard in the Pac-12 tournament, which helped them win it, obviously. And, South Carolina, we were thinking about this yesterday, me and Terry talking about it. I've really struggled to think about teams that ran zone against them this season. It was just something they're not used to going up against, and it gave them fits yesterday.
It did.
I think when they found, even when South Carolina found some things against the zone, it did take them a while. I thought Lamont was very...
The second half was a lot better than the first half.
Yeah,
from an
as far as... I think they were able to adjust some things. Like you saw, like Michi took more charge.
Yeah.
Of I'm going to get into the lane. I'm going to move around. They moved the ball a little bit better. But even when they were able to find some spots, they would have kind of some uncharacteristic turnovers, or Oregon would make a really good play, or something would happen. You get an open shot and you don't hit it, right? So I think just a compounding of all those different factors, you give Oregon all the credit, right? I think. But South Carolina, did they play their best game? No, I don't think so. And Oregon, look, they've got some really good players too. I mean, I know all the talk was about, you kind of look at their seed, right? 11 seed. Well, they just ran through the Pac-12 tournament. They just beat Arizona.
They're underseeded, man.
They're way underseeded. And that's what we talked about this going in. Oregon is an 11. They just won their conference tournament.
Right.
Like, they've beaten some good teams this year. That, as much as you can have, like every draw in the NCAA tournament to a degree is tough, especially, even nowadays, a 15 seed is tough. Sometimes a 16 seed. I thought that was tougher, right? Like, as far as an 11 seed, you looked at that and went, man, that's more like, I don't know, a 6, a 7, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, somewhere around there.
You got Dante, you got Cousinard, Kwame Evans, the freshman. He was a McDonald's All-American. Like, they've got really good players.
And I think to credit, like you're talking about with Michi, Michi's an alpha. Like, Michi was the guy that looked around and said, we're down double digits, and somebody's got to take command of this thing, and it's going to be me, and I'm going down swinging. Like, either I'm going to hit some contested shots or I'm going to miss them. Either way, it's going to be on my terms. And, you kind of respect the guy that's willing to just take the ball and say, it's kind of go time. This is our last stand. And he ended up having a great second half and kind of At least it felt like, though, every time South Carolina would make a little kind of mini run,
Yeah.
Oregon would answer back, or there was a couple of plays where I thought South Carolina played great defense, but then just there's one that just sticks out in my mind. They played great defense, and then it appeared they had a shot at the rebound and just didn't quite completely box out, and Oregon ends up getting an offensive board, and it didn't play out the way they needed. And you know, I thought a big part of the last two games for South Carolina is that I thought Oregon really frustrated Colin Murray-Boyles, and Colin actually told Jack in postgame that he'd been dealing with a virus. So I thought that, and it wasn't I'm going to make an excuse thing. It was just, hey, I haven't quite felt like myself.
He didn't look like himself.
So that actually made sense to me hearing that, because he was so just he was so impactful for so much of the SEC tournament or SEC conference play throughout the year. I mean, and then he just did not look as aggressive as we've seen him. Like his confidence throughout most of the year for a freshman was off the charts. He looked like just more passive than we're used to seeing him.
There was one play, and I think it was in the second half, because, you know, I think you and I were texting about it. I was texting with several people about it. He doesn't quite look like himself, doesn't look as aggressive, exactly what you were saying. There was one play where he got the ball, and he's like, I'm taking this. Like, don't care what happens. Might get blocked into the stands. I might dunk it. I might lay it up. And he took it, and then he finished. And you're like, huh. You know, but it wasn't that – nothing was really consistent for them, you know, throughout the course of the game. And that was a big part of it.
Yeah, and when you have a matchup going against like a guy like Dante that we knew was, you know, kind of the focal point of this game, you need to be as close to 100%, as close to perfect as possible. And Colin Murray-Boyles with the virus wasn't 100%. This team wasn't perfect, especially in the first half. And again, a lot better in the second half from an offensive standpoint, but just could not slow down, you know, Oregon at any point during the games, getting any kind of runs going, especially there in the second half. So unfortunately, falling and getting bounced out of the first round of the NCAA tournament. We'll continue to react to this, get some sound from Coach Paris as well, as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls on your Friday here on the game.
I don't know if that's right or not. Like, how many?
All right, guys, like we tell you every single week, maybe you got that sports fan in your life that you just don't know how to buy for. Maybe there's a graduation coming up for someone in your life, or just somebody's got a birthday coming up. How about checking out our friends at Goal Line Framing and a custom framing job? That could be anything from a diploma to original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags, or a signed print. They can handle any and all of that. Maybe even things I'm not even thinking of. They've been in business for over 20 years. Head on over to 511 12th Street, West Columbia. In-store, if you need more ideas, they've got an art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items. I can tell you we've been there multiple times. Owner Kendall Walsh, manager Tony James, they are going to take outstanding care of you. We can say that from firsthand knowledge. 803-739-1337 is the number. Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Those are the hours. Head on over there now or give them a call, 803-739-1337.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Friday morning. Before we jump back into the basketball conversation, our guy Josh has informed us we do have some tickets to give away. Baseball action on Tuesday, taking on Presbyterian out at Founders Park. Have two pairs. Callers number 4 and 5 right now, 803-404-6100. Each win yourself a pair of tickets to go see baseball take on Presbyterian on Tuesday night. Hopefully, that is after a successful weekend series against Vanderbilt coming up this weekend. Again, tonight's game, postponed, doubleheader coming up tomorrow, and then normal game coming up on Sunday. Before Dave answers those phone calls, last night, still up in there in Pittsburgh, a couple of the Gamecock Central guys hanging around for this one. Kentucky falls to Oakland 80-76. John Calipari kind of threw his team under the bus after the game. Let's hear it, Dave.
And but you know, we had some guys that didn't play the way they'd been playing all year. We did everything we could. We knew the zone would be tough, but we missed shots we don't miss. And you know, the preparation, I thought they were in a great, trying to keep them loose, but when the game started, you had some guys not play to the level they could play.
You know, when you think about John Calipari, obviously Kentucky kind of gets the benefit of the doubt of being Kentucky and always being thought of as one of the, if not the best programs in college basketball. But these past couple seasons, they've been bounced in the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament this year and in 2022, in the first round specifically, by double-digit seeds. These are not the things that Kentucky fans enjoy taking place. And I imagine the seat underneath Calipari, while he's probably not going to get fired right now, it's getting hotter and hotter.
Do we know that he's not getting fired?
Maybe not for sure. Anything can happen, I guess.
Got a $33-something million buyout. We just saw a football coach get 75 to not coach.
That's true.
It's a big buyout, though.
That's true.
And he's got a big salary.
And my question is, like, who are you going to get to replace him?
I mean, I don't know, but I think, man, if this was once, then you'd just say, all right, these are fans being fans. But this is Kentucky.
Yeah.
And, you know, I saw an absurd stat that I'm not going to repeat it just because I have no idea if it's actually true or not because it was on Twitter. But the percentage of all-stars in the NBA this past year that went to Kentucky, it was insane. So, like, they have consistently, without question, had more NBA talent than any program in the country in recent memory, and it's not even close. Yet, when you have the result, is that the 4 recent results right there, Chris? Mm-hmm. So in the last 4 years, you had what? An early exit. You had a year where they didn't finish above 500. You had 1 win in there. I think they went 1-1 in the tournament in one of the last 4 years, and then you had the first round knockout in there as well. So the last 4 years, that is completely unacceptable to Kentucky fans.
1 game in 4 years.
Yeah, because of the talent you have, right? Mm-hmm. And whether what he said is true or not about the players, and there is a little bit, not to give Cal the complete benefit of the doubt, there is a little bit of a, to me, a worry when you just listen to a guy's 20-second clip and are like, oh, he threw his team under the bus, when maybe the 2 minutes before, I don't know, I didn't watch his press conference.
I did.
You, really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Just wanted to see what he had to say.
Okay, did he, within the confines of the press conference, also say it's on me? You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, because he was asked some interesting questions, actually. Somebody said, what could you have done differently? And he answered it by saying, he actually gave very quickly a quick example of, hey, I was trying to call a time. I needed to call a timeout in this situation, and I didn't, right? And he did go into some more detail. You know, I love these kids. I thought they were built for March. I thought he went into a lot of detail. Yeah, like, hey, we won close games in this situation. We've been on the road. We came from behind. You know, but I thought the most interesting thing that he said, and Jay Wright, former Villanova head coach who was doing analysis, who is phenomenal. I mean, he was an amazing coach, too. Very thoughtful guy. They both spoke to this. So Calipari was asked, do you need to adjust your model? And Wes, your point about the amount of NBA talent, like that is the pitch for Kentucky. They have a couple main recruiting pitches. One of them is they do have a lot of trophies. They have won historically. They are a name brand program. But Cal's number one pitch is, he alluded to this last night, players and their families, they go to Kentucky if they're like, all right, what's the place that I can go to have a stepping stone to the NBA? What's going to prepare me for the next level? That is his number one recruiting pitch. He's very open about that.
Sure.
And so he was asked, do you need to adjust? And he said, look, our guys, because he said the thing again at the beginning of the presser, we're a young team. And I started rolling my eyes because this is what you've chosen.
You don't get to use the young team excuse, right?
No, but then he said, I don't know. It might be tough because now, and he overshot. He said, we're playing against teams whose average age is 25. And our average age is 18. Yeah, they're older
by
guys.
choice.
Well,
By choice.
By choice.
That's how you've built your program. You have a lot of guys coming in and one and done. You know what to expect. And yes, Jack Golke is 24, 25 years old, and he killed you for 32 points last night. But again, that's where you're going to run into with a lot of these mid-major teams. And he said it himself last night, I'm not going to the NBA. This is all I got. And these guys that have been around and played a lot of basketball for years, you run into them in these tournament settings.
He was also a transfer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
South Carolina, old team, beat Kentucky. Veteran team.
are you telling me that if Kentucky said we want the 5 best transfers in the country this offseason, that they couldn't get older?
Of course,
So
they could.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. You can't say, oh, we're a young team when you draft players as opposed to recruit them. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
You pick. Are you battling at time? Are you battling with Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, some of those schools for the top elite guys? Of course, but you landed a lot of the top elite guys, and that's kind of how you built your program. So if you do it by choice, I don't think you get to pull the youth card.
Well, and he seems like, guys, that, because I was curious how would he answer that question, will you think about changing? Because he's been asked that at other times. Now it's really starting to, all right, you got one tournament win in 4 years.
Yeah.
What are you going to do differently to bring this thing back around? And he said, I don't know, guys. It's going to be hard for me to change because we've helped so many families, reach their goals, which basically means go to the NBA, right?
Sure.
And for a lot of those players, they go to Kentucky. Yeah, sure, they want to win, I'm sure. But they go there as a stepping stone, and the hope is you win some games along the way.
Well, nobody commits to Kentucky with the old cliche of for the next 3 to 4 years, or next 4 years, or whatever it may be, I'm going to be a Kentucky Wildcat. No, you hope you're going to be there for 2 semesters and get drafted in the first round of the NBA, and then not have to worry about school ever again.
Yeah, that's the dream, and that's and if that's his number one recruiting pitch, to his credit, he's successful in that. It happens. And so it's just a matter of you would assume that those two interests are aligned. Get drafted highly in the NBA while also winning games.
Right.
You would think. And to an extent, I think they are. But maybe not as much as we would ultimately think. And also, guess what? This is what happens when you take 64, 68 teams and just say, let's let chaos ensue. Is Oakland better than Kentucky? No.
I've said this for a long time. A 64, 68 teams when you count the play-in single elimination tournament is not the best way to determine a champion in college basketball. But we enjoy it because of the chaos. And yesterday was chaos on full display. All the 11 seeds won, including Oregon, obviously. You had this game with, Kentucky and Oakland. Stanford maybe should have taken down Kansas last night if they get a foul called correctly at the end of the game.
That was brutal.
That was brutal. I really feel for them on that one. That was very unfortunate. But that's what we love. It's very entertaining, and that's why we lock into all these television sets over the course of March. But yeah, Kentucky's a better team than Oakland. But last night, Oakland did what they needed to do to win.
Yeah, Oakland's better. Oakland actually is the better team because they won.
Yes,
that one
technically
game. Technically speaking, but yeah, Kentucky just loaded. Just loaded with talent. They're bringing in more talent. And Cal alluded to that as well. Of hey, I'm bringing in another reason why he may not want to change. We got a great group coming in next year, too.
That's
a bunch
right.
of ballyhooed freshmen once again.
You don't want to just suddenly change up your model. And again, when you have a $33 million buyout, getting booted from your job may not be as easy as some people think.
And I know we might get into this later, but South Carolina, their model is, I think, exactly what you saw from Lamont Paris this past season. Let's mix the two.
Sure.
Now, I don't know if you'll be able to replicate in the portal what you did this past offseason. Mac, Cooper, Stephen Clark, who saw his role diminish, right, but still played a role for this team, and Miles Studi.
Right.
That's certainly the goal. Can you do something like that? I think South Carolina is going to be very active in the portal too, and I think some of the names once they come out of as the portal keeps going here, as we watch who Lamont Paris and his staff pursue, I think there are going to be a lot of guys with experience that they target in the portal.
Absolutely. Women's basketball getting set to start their tournament coming up later on today, 2 o'clock tip, 1:30 pregame, taking on Presbyterian. We'll have that for you here on the game. We'll talk to Chris Wellbaum from Gamecock Central coming up next, get his thoughts, and he previews this matchup as your Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls along here on the game.
All right, everyone, tell you about another one of our outstanding sponsors here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. It's our friends at Integrated Media. IntegratedMediaInc.com is where you can go to learn more about their services, or you can give Michael and Nathan and their entire team a call, 803-948-8327. If you go to their website, again, it's IntegratedMediaInc.com. You can learn more about what they can do for your home or for your business, whether it's something as simple as mounting a TV, hiding all those ugly wires for you, making sure that it's outfitted with Sonos wireless speakers, a soundbar, whatever type of audio solution you want. The guys at Integrated Media can do it for you. They can do something like that. They can do something as complex as a complete smart home system where from your smartphone you can control your lighting, thermostat, sound systems, TVs, security cameras, and alarms. They can do it all for you. They can make sure your internet is also top-notch at your home or your business. IntegratedMediaInc.com or 803-948-8327. Yeah, I asked Dave if they had his number. Do need to get your boys some more reviews.
All right, we're back. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Tyler just left us, but he'll be back at about noon. I'm Wes. He's Chris. Hey, shout out to my friend Joe Reeder. He was in here a second ago from Classic Roofing. This is not their ad time, but we'll throw them a little love. 803-590-7870. Appreciate them for their support of our show, and thanks to Joe for stopping by. Mac didn't stop by. I guess he didn't want to see us, man. But anyway, yeah, I'm Wes. He's Chris. We're going out now live. We got Chris Wellbaum, Gamecock Central, joining us to preview the start of March Madness on the women's basketball side. Chris, how we doing today, man?
Doing good. How about yourself?
We are good. Getting ready for some March Madness. Obviously, for South Carolina, this is going to be a game against PC where they're going to be heavily favored, and a team they actually took care of handily earlier this year. But what do you think, other than the obvious of just win the game, what do you think the goal should be for South Carolina in this matchup in terms of just doing all the things they would want to do to solidify themselves going into the rest of this tournament?
Yeah, I mentioned on the website this morning that I'm going to be looking at turnovers because South Carolina's had a couple of games this season with just tons of turnovers, and it hasn't been so much what the opponent did. It's been a lack of focus on their part. And so this is the sort of the game where I can, you've been off for a week. They took 4 days off from practice. This is there could be some rust. And I think if there's rust, we'll see it in the turnovers. So I want to see them come out, be very efficient, protect the ball, and just take care of business.
Chris, speaking of rust, I mean, there's always kind of that thing of, do you want rust? Do you want rest? Kind of what's more important? And I think for South Carolina, luckily you are in a position where you face a team today that it's going to be tough for them to mount any type of ability to stop you at the end of the day. So how important, knowing that you are going to have maybe a game to knock off that rust, how important for a team that's going through just a gauntlet this year and scheduled such a tough non-con as well, how important is it that they've been able to kind of get off their feet maybe for a week or so?
I think it's huge. And, I mean, you laid everything out why. The entire season was a challenge, and then you cap it off with 3 very challenging, very physical games in the SEC tournament. And it's good to be number one. That's why the tournament's set up the way it is. They have some margin for error. The 8-9 game Michigan State and North Carolina just tipped off. Those teams have no room for error because they have to compete at their best as soon as the ball is tipped.
Chris, I want to get your big picture thoughts actually on the bracket. And so let's go. I mean, I hate to say let's just skim past the PC game, right? But, I mean, as Wes mentioned earlier, this is a team you've already played. They're a 16 seed. You beat them 99-29 earlier in the season when I think PC was actually at more full strength at that point. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
they've had a few injuries since then.
Yeah, several injuries from what they were saying. So South Carolina has some very intriguing teams on their side of the bracket. You got Notre Dame, who the Gamecocks saw earlier this season. They saw, Ole Miss earlier this season. They've got those guys. North Carolina, who they've seen. And then you've got a perennially good Indiana team. Anything that sticks out to you on this side of the bracket in this region?
The biggest thing that jumped out at me was that I don't want to say all those teams are overrated because they're not. They're all good teams, but the committee stuck with the S curve this year, which they aren't always able to do because of the seeding rules. But Notre Dame was the lowest of the number 2 seeds, and you basically go down the line and all of the teams in this region are at the bottom of the curve, except for maybe Oregon State, who arguably could have been at number 2, and they're number 3. Notre Dame also has had an injury. One of their key post players, Kyrie Watson, is done for the year with a torn ACL, so that weakens the bracket even further. It just as I've said before, you always the easy bracket's always the one that seems to have the most chaos. But right now, this seems like the easiest bracket for a number 1 seed to come out of.
North Carolina, Michigan State, like you said, well, you have just tipped off. Is currently, at least in my updates, 2-2. Very, very early in the game. What? We obviously won't talk to you before. You would assume South Carolina wins today. One of these two teams will win, then they'll face off on Sunday. What can you tell us about UNC and Michigan State in terms of expectations for that game on Sunday?
Well, I'm really interested in today's game, but that's going on right now because it's just a total contrast in styles. And Michigan State likes to put up points. They like to shoot a lot. They're very balanced. They play a lot of players. They're I think 15th in the country in bench scoring and 6th in the country in total points. And North Carolina is the polar opposite. They barely go to the bench. They rely very heavily on their starters, and they want to slow it down, grind it out, and kind of muck up the game like we saw them do to South Carolina up in Chapel Hill. So it's going to be very interesting to see which team can sort of force the other to play at its pace, and then whoever comes out of it's going to have to turn around very quickly and do it again on Sunday. I think North Carolina's got to like their chances just because they played South Carolina so close. But the flip side is with Michigan State, you've got the element of surprise. I think South Carolina learned its lesson on how to play North Carolina in the first game, so I don't expect, if they were to play each other, I wouldn't expect it to be as close. Michigan State's more of a mystery. I don't know how they'd react.
Welly, let's zoom out to the full bracket now. You got any intriguing upsets for us that you've picked?
I have not looked at the bracket, the schedule for today since Sunday, so let me pull it up.
Do you have Rice beating LSU? Do you have Iowa losing to Holy Cross?
Nothing like that. I do think that Iowa, as as favorable as South Carolina's region is, that's how unfavorable Iowa's is. Every round is a team that not just has a chance, has a good chance of pulling the upset against Iowa. They've Kansas State's in their region. They've lost to Kansas State twice in the last 2 years. Louisville's a really good defensive team. LSU's in that region. UCLA, when UCLA is healthy, I think they're the second best team in the country. As far as upset watch, one of them is South Dakota State and Utah. That's a 5-12 in the Portland 4, because South Carolina played South Dakota State earlier this season, and beat them easily. But the Jackrabbits are good. They're good every year, and those are the type of mid-majors that can pull off upsets because they're not going to be scared of the moment. Another 5-12 is Baylor and Vanderbilt. Baylor has kind of limped to the finish, and we saw it last year with Ole Miss, Georgia, a bunch of teams. That SEC physicality and defense is something that other teams just aren't used to. So Syracuse and Arizona is one that everyone's got circled, and I'm not sure why, because I think Syracuse is pretty good. But that's a popular upset pick. And I'm just going through the bracket here. Ohio State's capable of beating anybody or losing to anybody, so nothing they do surprises me anymore.
Hey, well, Bob, we're about out of time on this segment, man, but real quick, on the spot, are we going to see a South Carolina-Iowa rematch in the national title?
I look at it as a versus the field question, so I'm going to say no, just because it's going to be incredibly tough for Iowa to even make the Final Four.
All right, great stuff. As always, that's Chris Wellbaum from Gamecock Central giving us a little breakdown of South Carolina's path in March Madness with the bracket kicking off today. Welly, enjoy the game today, man. We'll be right back on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. All right, welcome back in. Closing things out here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark. Man, Chris, great breakdown there from Chris Wellbaum. And I think it's fascinating the expectations that Dawn Staley has built in Columbia. And I saw somebody posted on our board that South Carolina is like a 65-point favorite in game one. So there is, I think, when you're as good as they are, like, yeah, rust versus rest is like a real conversation for tournament situations a lot of times. But for South Carolina, I think you take the rest every day because you have this game where you can play a lot of girls. You can get everybody onto the court. You can put yourself in a situation where you can kind of knock that rust off without there being any real threat.
That's right.
For losing this game, right?
Yeah, I think so. Again, this is a team that, no disrespect to PC, right? I think their team would. I don't know how they're playing it. I haven't read any of their media stuff, but they're probably just, we're just going to go out there and play. It's a great opportunity. But you beat them again. You beat them by 70 earlier in the season. It was 99 to 29, and that was when it was like a quote-unquote better version of PC. It's not really on your radar even to lose this game. You could really kind of sleepwalk through it. But I agree with you. Rest is the priority here. I actually talked to Olivia Thompson about that, last week, last Garnet Trust Hour, that before the tournament started with her, as soon as the brackets came out, she talked about the importance of rest and how some coaches, some programs don't prioritize it as much. Their solution is, lift more weights or do more, right? And she talked about how Dawn Staley does a really good job of understanding the point of that. And we've said this many times here on the program. This is a team that's been tired at times this year because they have gone through a grind and they've had to strain to win some games. It's hard to go through as long of a season as they did, and then to do it unscathed from a wins-losses standpoint, it drains a lot from you. So I think that they earned their 1 seed, so they earned a very favorable matchup here. So I think it's just about getting out healthy, getting a win. Doesn't even really matter what it looks like. Who cares if you don't win by 60, 70 points? Just get to round 2.
Yeah, North Carolina currently, in my updates on ESPN.com, 2 minutes, 31 seconds to go in the first quarter. North Carolina up 17-5, so an early lead for UNC. Just 12 points, so, we'll see. But UNC certainly started off this game in a position to advance. And honestly, what we saw out of UNC earlier this year when they faced South Carolina at home, I'm a little bit surprised that they went on to have a season where they're only an 8 seed. I thought they looked to me to be a pretty solid team. So I think that's a game, certainly, if it ends up being South Carolina versus North Carolina, you certainly at home, South Carolina is going to be pretty heavily favored. But that is not a game that you can just sleepwalk through, I think. So I think today is about sort of – you don't want to – when they go into the press conference after today's game, you don't want for the conversation to be, yeah, South Carolina won by 45, but they just didn't play all that well. That's not, you want for today to be when you sort of feel like everything is coming together and then you springboard into the rest of this tournament, I think.
Yeah, second half, a lot of and when you say South Carolina's bench, a lot of them play big minutes in big games kind of early, right? But you want your bench to be playing the second half of this game and still playing well, right? Because you're going to need them to beat, if this score holds, to beat North Carolina and to go through the rest of the bracket and make a deep run.
Yeah, North Carolina now continuing to extend that lead 21-5 as the first quarter gets closed out. So North Carolina playing pretty good basketball right now. Let's go back real quick to the men's side, Chris. I mean, not to go all moral victory on everyone. Once you get to the tournament, we talked about it yesterday. Once you get there, you want to win a game. You want to put yourself in a position to celebrate a tournament win. But when you kind of zoom out of the big picture, if you're a fan out there, once the hurt of this loss goes away, you still have to accept what a surprise kind of magical season it was compared to what the expectations were.
Yeah, now you can step back and be bummed about the loss, right? but you shouldn't have gone into this thing being angered or upset. Hey, I'm going to be so mad if South Carolina loses, right? Because of now, if you're a Kentucky fan, you can be upset there, but don't lose sight of what South Carolina's done. I think now you zoom out, you start looking forward, right? The portal's open. There's going to be some targets. What can they do in the portal to bring this thing forward because you feel good about the foundation?
Yeah, they are burning the KSR message boards to the ground on the Kentucky sites. But, I think lots of portal talk coming up into the weekend and coming up next week. There's no time to relax. You got to go ahead and start getting in a position to replace some of these guys. That's going to do it for us here. We're going to turn the reins over to Terry and Tyler. For Chris, I'm Wes. Y'all have a great one.
All right, everyone, tell you about our outstanding presenting sponsor here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour on the Game. It's our friends at Firehouse Subs, and we've been spending a lot of time here on the program talking about basketball and all the amazing action that's been going on. Hope you've been enjoying it like we have, but you know what else you need to maximize your enjoyment, in my opinion, of all that great action is Firehouse Subs. Whether it's one sub, whether it's a sub for your entire family, or whether you want to place a catering order on firehousesubs.com, they can do it all for you. Whether you want lunch, dinner, whether you want catering for a party, go to firehousesubs.com or download the Firehouse Subs app. You can use the Rapid Rescue to go to order your catering or your sandwich if you just want one. Avoid the wait and order online. Check out some of your favorite Firehouse Subs at firehousesubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app. You can sign up for rewards to maximize future purchases. Firehousesubs.com.